Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all who has joined the webinar this afternoon. I am Sumit and I'll be moderating the webinar today. This webinar is organized by CDUP Advisors. CDUP is a service tech startup which offers expert services covering the business needs of SMEs and self-employed professionals. CDUP's service offerings include incorporations, business registrations, IP and trademarks, accounting services, fundraising through debt and equity, which is again the core area and expertise of CDUP. Uh, then tax compliances, legal services, and IT services. About CDUP, CDUP is a cloud-hosted digital platform which can be accessed by business owners for services and solutions to start and grow a business. It offers pricing discipline and convenience of digital delivery across all service verticals, and it aims to emerge and establish itself into a one-stop, single-click ecosystem partner for aspiring entrepreneurs and growing businesses. Today's discussion is aimed at understanding the need and importance of complying with the rules and regulations while starting or running a business. So, in this call, we intend to cover what, how, and why of business laws and compliances. So, in the next 1 hour of this webinar, we'll try and cover all those topics revolving around the need for compliance in starting and running a business. We'll open the floor for questions towards the end of the session, and hence I request all the participants to type their query in the message box given below, and we'll address those questions in the appropriate time. So without much ado, let me now introduce our guest speaker for today. It's my privilege and honor to introduce Srimati Savitri Parekh, Joint Company Secretary and Compliance Officer of Reliance Industries Limited. Srimati Parekh, an authority in matters of business laws and compliance, is an LLB and a fellow member of Institute of Company Secretaries of India. She has more than 3 decades of experience in the matters of business law and compliances. She has been a guest faculty at IIM Kolkata for over 10 years, and she has also authored 3 books on Companies Act 2013 and on listing regulations. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and giving us the opportunity to hear your views on the subject matter. So let us first begin by hearing about your journey. 30 years, and you have seen much and all. I mean, the oil crisis in the 80s, the Gulf War, and India's sovereign default in the early 90s, the dot-com bubble, the subprime crisis, UPA 1, UPA 2, NDA 1, NDA 2, and much more, right? So the regulatory framework and the environment in India in today's time is metamorphically different from the 80s and 90s. So what has been your experience of riding through this regulatory framework evolution in the last 3 decades?
Thank you very much, Sumit. First of all, I would like to congratulate you all for an excellent initiative as CDUP advisors. What you just mentioned in terms of having a one-stop shop for all these advisory services is certainly a move in the right direction. In fact, I'm also a chairperson of the Corporate Governance Committee of the Bombay Chamber, and I've often spoken saying that compliances are not being ensured not because people want to non-comply, but because compliances are not transparently understood. Coming back to your basic question, yes, Shumit, it's been a very interesting journey over the last 30 years. If I look over over my shoulder over the last 30 years, from the time I began as a management trainee, let me tell you, it was the license Raj then, and I still remember industrial licenses were required to be applied. MRTP Act, one needed to apply for getting approvals if you wanted to acquire shareholding in another company. And what I have always found very fascinating is under FEMA, which was then called FERA, if the managing director wanted to travel overseas, it was necessary for him to write a report after he returned. And there was something called a blanket exchange permit. And I remember the secretarial department used to keep it very safe because every time the person went out, there was a handwritten noting which was made on the blanket exchange permit. All this changed from July 21st, 1991. So seeing this transition in 1991, when I was completely green behind my ears, was really a very good learning. The second milestone has been 2013, when Companies Act 2013 was passed. It's actually rare for a professional to be able to actively handle two situations, the before after. Of course, even under FERA became FEMA, and it was a sea change between the two. However, in terms of the basic provisions, I for one actually still basically understand the foreign exchange provisions by remembering the FERA provisions rather than FEMA. But that's not the case with Companies Act. A lot has changed, and for that matter, even Companies Amendment Act of 2020 has understood the pain points with respect to business, and a lot of these fines have become penalties, and that makes a lot of difference. I'm sure there's going to be a question on what are fines and what are penalties. Let me reserve it for that. Talking in terms of my journey, so this has been more from a professional journey perspective where I could see all this. And as you mentioned a little while ago, I've also been an active academician as well as a student when it comes to writing of books. In fact, very interestingly, I had written one book of Ramaiah on Companies Act for directors. And when I was writing this book, I was actually looking at the requirements of the directors. They're not here to understand the nuances of the law, but they're here to understand the touch points where they need to refer to an expert. And that's the awareness which I focused on when I wrote this book around 4 years ago. From my own perspective, I would say that every time I sat down to write, it was like a small child wanting to blow a balloon once again. It was a new learning altogether because it was looking at the law from a fresh pair of eyes, being able to understand it because law is one which, while it is supposed to be dynamic, it needs to catch up with business, and business has several challenges thrown at it, and everything keeps changing in business. So it's been an interesting journey of writing, teaching, where I would say I learned the most because standing on your feet and thinking of something often brings about better clarity in one's own thinking. And I think all this has added to what I am today. And I'm eternally grateful to all my students who have helped me get this. Over to you.
Right, great. Of course, ma'am, 30 years of experience, and you have seen changes, which started from early 80s, 90s to what we have seen today. And of course, the kind of experience you have and the kind of, things you have looked at in the past, it gives you a lot of clarity in terms of where we and where we are today. So as you rightly said, ma'am, I mean, non-compliance is not something which is an attitude or a habit of people. It's more about awareness about the right laws, about the right compliances. So if you look at the Indian business landscape, we have a landscape where the large businesses, the medium businesses, the small businesses, and the micro businesses, everybody coexist. But when it comes to complying with the laws and regulations, we see that mostly large companies do have the awareness, the bandwidth, or the team or expertise, to comply, and they enjoy the fruits of complying with the laws. But when it comes to looking at the compliances, happening at the SME level or at the micro enterprise level, we still see that much needs to be done there. So, what do you think is the critical issue? Why the small businesses, the micro businesses, the small business, or the medium businesses, they are somewhere who are looked at with a different glass, when it comes to complying with the laws and regulations of businesses.
Sure. That's actually a very interesting question, I would say, because as I mentioned right in my opening remarks, non-compliance is not a choice that a person decides to do. It's not by design, but it is more by default that non-compliances happen. Let me just give you an example. When I was working for VFS Global, where I handled work in about 44 countries worldwide, I distinctly recollect whenever there was an assignment in the developed countries, US, Australia, or the like, the first thing the joint venture partner would do is to bring in a lawyer. And he would, of course, call me up and tell me that if I could ensure that the billable hours went down, but a lawyer was a must. What happens in India is that we very often tend to handle a lot of it on our own. I won't for a moment say that it is bad, but things have actually become far more complex today, and therefore it is better to have advice right from the beginning. Of course, it should be one which is cost efficient, which is, of course, a concern of every businessman. But having said that, it certainly makes more sense to have advice. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, ma'am. Carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So it is always advisable to have an advisor who can give you cost effective advice. Now, coming back to the point of compliances, actually, in our country, we have several separate distinct laws. For example, we have the central law as well as the state law, which often creates a lot of confusion. Like, say, for example, take the case of the municipal laws. Every municipality has its own statute, and therefore it becomes a bit of a challenge. Similarly, you also have the gram panchayats, where each one works on their own in terms of the levies and taxes. So therefore, within the same country, we have multiple compliances, and which also poses a challenge. But that's one part of it. In terms of compliances, if I were to take a step back, I would say that creating awareness on broad compliances is always going to be in the interest of the MSMEs also. More importantly, because when you create value, you create it consciously. What happens is the accretion that you make to the value is one which grows exponentially as your business grows. Let me give you a simple example, once again taking a cue from the kind of services that you provide. Okay, intellectual property rights. Very often, businesses are not clearly aware of the intellectual property rights. So therefore, at the time of the conception of a trademark, if you have not given enough thought, after your product becomes of a sizable turnover and is reasonably popular in the marketplace, you might find that it is similar to one of the other products which is available. Now, to do a simple search actually does not cost money at all. And even if you give it to an expert, it would definitely not be very expensive, because a trademark search is available free of cost. So, giving an option to an MSME saying that, look, you can search yourself, but if you want assistance, this is what it is. A lot of these services may not really be very expensive, but you do it at the right time, have a portmanteau word as a trademark, it'll actually get monetized over a period of time. So getting to know about the asset creation right from the beginning certainly would go a long way. Compliances do not necessarily mean only what you need to necessarily do. It also could be on the asset side of your balance sheet. And let's assume you create 5 trademarks. After 5 years, it's going to be hard cash in your hand.
Right. So I understand, ma'am. I mean, it have to basically put out the factors which typically becomes a roadblock for entrepreneurs to take the compliance seriously. So one could be the attitude, where the entrepreneurs are not really open to looking compliances from a very friendly manner, right? The second could be the complexity of it, as you rightly said, that you have multiple levels of regulatory authorities, and it makes more and more complex. Third could be awareness, right? I mean, you know something, you don't know something, and then you have to access an expert to go and seek advice. And the fourth could be the cost. As you rightly said, the cost benefit analysis is something which is overlooked. Sometimes a lot of people believe that compliance is an unproductive cost, and so they take it seriously or lightly, right? So if I have to put all these factors together, what do you think becomes the biggest challenge for the small and medium enterprises, or for business owners who are looking to start a business, to address the compliance need for their business?
Sure. First, let me address the issue of cost. Of course, it's a cliched statement. Cost of compliance is certainly high. Try non-compliance instead. However, that's not really something that one has a choice on. The point here is that cost of compliance is actually not much. However, it depends on how exactly all this stacks up. So it's very essential to determine the kind of entity that you want to do your business in. If it's always going to be a one-man show, why form a company at all? And there's nothing wrong in having a sole proprietary concern. And once you have the critical mass, maybe get the business acquired by a company, which is also another way of looking at it. However, if you have a company, you have a separate legal identity. And since a company is a separate legal entity, different and distinct from the person forming it, even the liabilities get limited, which is certainly an advantage which one would have. But a company form of organization also means that you need to have greater accountability, and you need to have filings with the registrar of companies time and again, and there has to be a bit of a discipline and governance which needs to be put in place. Now, coming back to the issue of cost effective advisory, that's something which in the country has started mushrooming, and I would say that you do have good advisors who would be able to support at the initial stages. The needs of business keep changing. It's, in the initial formative stage, it's more about understanding the compliances and putting the systems in place. According to me, that's a very important phase where you need to know what you need to comply with. For example, if you were to buy a car, you of course need to have your road tax paid, you need to have your registration certificate in hand, you need to ensure that you have a driving license with you. So even for something as simple as a small car, you're going to have 4 compliances with respect to the vehicle. And once you start driving it on the streets, that's an operational compliance, ensuring that you abide by all the signals on the way, ensure that you take care of all the road traffic etiquettes for ensuring that the other motorists are not inconvenienced. Business is not much different. What you need to understand are these main buckets. What are the main buckets of compliances which you need to necessarily ensure whether you do business or not, and what are the opportunities with respect to the legal environment which you are rightfully entitled to, and you must ensure that you get it. And very often I've seen that MSMEs are not fully aware of what they are entitled to get, and therefore they end up losing those advantages also. So that's something which also is one which should be taken into account, and advisory should be provided. So just to sum it up, I would say that yes, it's an interplay of all the points that you mentioned. However, getting good advice when you are small will go a long way. It's like, the sunk cost in building a diaphragm wall when you're constructing a building is far more. And the deeper you go, the edifice is going to be much taller and stronger. And that's exactly the way businesses will have to be structured. And not to forget, corporate governance is another important area. It's not something which is very different. Corporate governance is actually about the character of the business. So, it's something where it's not necessary that you have 200 processes in place. Start with 3. Build it. Start small, build as you go along, but you should know the journey. It's not one which should just be, the way it keeps happening. Don't do because the government is only asking you to do from a compliance perspective. Look at it in terms of what's in it for me, in terms of my business. How does this help me? Is it going to help me in the long run? And look at the long run, long term, and take it forward.
Yeah, ma'am, as you rightly said, you don't need to comply just because the government asks you to do so, right? Of course, there are long-term benefits of compliances. So, I mean, if I have to dig deeper into it, besides the government asking you to comply with the rules and regulations, what other benefits, can really these businesses expect in the longer term? Why would anybody be motivated or inspired to start complying from day one, and thinking the long-term benefits in perspective? So what really could benefit, if somebody takes the compliance seriously from day one for their business?
Sure. So, compliances, we've always looked at compliances as one where you need to comply, you need to do. Now, compliances, if you were to take a step back and look at it, compliances also give you opportunities in terms of options. For example, let's say it's a tech startup. Instead of putting in the money, or of course, you would have a basic critical working capital which is required. But other than that, instead of putting in cash for share capital, you can actually bring it in terms of sweat equity. So that when you get an opportunity to offload your certain percentage of the share capital to an investor, maybe a PE fund or a VC, as the case may be, or even in terms of selling off a product, you would have a bit of structuring that can be done. And when you look at compliance, it could actually even be in the form of a buyback of shares. So how exactly should you structure? What should be the right mix of capital and debt? How exactly do you structure this? Are all, once again, compliance issues. And once you've decided on it, typically one would look at it only as equity. But equity is just one of the several capital options that you have. So there are other capital instruments which one can look at. And also in terms of, once again, going back to the basic question of how exactly do you scale up the compliance, that's exactly the way you build it in to ensure that you have an adequate mix of each of these. And if you're looking at an exit, or if you're looking at a partner coming in, how exactly would you be structuring? What's your balance sheet going to look like today? What's it going to look like in 2 years' time? What is the break even, and how exactly are you going to be funding it? The rest of it in terms of accounting will always keep happening. So that's the kind of opportunity that one would be looking at.
Right. Correct. So I
And
was
apart from this, I would also like to add just another point. Say, for example, in case of MSMEs, there are these bill discounting facility which the government has under the MSME Act. So is there an advantage? What is the cost of capital? How exactly do you free up your working capital? Apart from just the traditional cash credit or overdraft, typically most of the MSMEs would go for only overdraft facility. So what is the cost of capital? And do you have any exports to foreign countries? If yes, can you look at a small ECB then? So those are the different options that you can actually look at, even given the small size of the business. Even with 10, 20 crores, you can actually do a bit of structuring.
great. Yes. Yes. I'll take a more a broader question here, ma'am. I mean, from my experience, I've seen that when it comes to adhering to compliances, I mean, when it comes to Indian corporate vis-a-vis the foreign corporates, we see foreign corporates take compliances more seriously than what we see in Indian corporates doing. Right? I have worked in the MNC in the past, and I've seen that people get fired when they non-comply with the regulations. They won't be fired for non-performance, but they will surely be fired if they break the compliance or if they violate the compliance, right? But typically that's not the case with the Indian businesses. Of late, we have seen that even the government has started taking the compliances very seriously, right? So I want to understand, how what is your sense on how important role a government play, right, in terms of creating a friendly environment, friendly compliance environment for the business owners in a country.
Um, According to me, the government plays a partnership role because businesses need to grow. And when I say partnership role, the government has two specific roles to perform. One is creating awareness and helping out, and second is enforcement. If let's say, for example, what you just mentioned a little while ago in terms of taking compliances seriously, taking compliances seriously would automatically happen if there is a deterrent for non-compliance. Now, the deterrent could be in the form of very heavy penalties and fines, or in the form of quicker prosecution, whether it be penalties, fines, or whatever be it. Now, when the time gap between commission of default, I won't even call it an offense, and enforcement action is shortened, then the need to comply within the business community automatically goes up. The best example is that of Singapore, where it's actually known to be a fine city, because anything that you do, if it's not okay, you're going to be fined, and it can happen pretty fast too. So therefore, if enforcement happens in a very short time cycle, the need to comply automatically goes up. I would also like to add that in India, that's slowly happening. Earlier, otherwise, there was always a feeling that if it goes to court, it'll go on for 20 years. Now, this 20 years is now no longer being said as 20 years. So, and also what's also happening in the different statutes is that if it's a technical error, you're not hanged for just one default. And there is a compounding provision. Similarly, under Companies Act, they have provided for penalties. All this would definitely have a positive effect and would also push up the need for compliance. So what will happen is the outliers will certainly need to either comply or move out completely. So the self opt-out will definitely go up because of this.
Yeah, so I will completely agree with this point because recently we read a news. I mean, it was in the publications that the government has cracked down on 7,000 GST tax evaders, GST evaders, and they did some around 200 arrests. So I think you're right when
That's
you say that things are gradually changing when it comes to enforceability of compliances, among the business owners and enterprises. So, in terms of the enforceability, how important the penalties and the levies and the fine? I mean, does that really kind of trigger an element of fear which forces the businesses to comply, or do you think there's something else which drives entrepreneurs and business owners to take compliance more seriously?
So I would say that having penalties is a very fair system because there's no stigma attached. Now, when I use the term stigma, I would put it in inverted commas because not every default is a case of a fraud. So, a serious one is something different, but a corporate default should always be distinguished unless there is someone who's got defrauded. So that's the approach which the government has taken, and that's exactly the reason the Companies Amendment Act 2020, a lot of these provisions, they've just brought it to penalties. Now, this is a welcome move. However, this is one where if it is supported by quick enforcement action, it will certainly lead to businesses complying. Now, that's one part of it. Of course, I'll not really go into the attitudinal issue of not wanting to comply because I personally feel that there will be a very small percentage there. Now, what else is required from the government side is one of advocacy, creating the awareness and ensuring. So there are two ways by which compliance automatically goes up. One is making compliance easy, and that's exactly what's covered in ease of doing business. And the second is making creating this awareness that look, if you don't comply, these are the repercussions. Let me also share another example, like what you were just mentioning a little while ago about developed countries. The need to comply is much higher because non-compliance doesn't pay. And in any case, they do go to legal advisors. So what happens is that they are aware, and even if there are innocent mistakes, it's not that people don't commit technical defaults there. I have actually seen businesses coming up to the lawyers and saying, hey, I've made a mistake, tell me how do I come out of this. And I don't actually find this happening in India. People would say, look, there are these 30 loopholes and this is the way I read this. And it takes a lot to say that, look, I've made a mistake, what do I do? And maybe a specialist then tells the person that, look, just go for compounding, it's not a big thing, move on with your business. Now what happens is if you don't do it, you're actually spending a lot of productive time in chasing something which is going to be non-productive, which doesn't really add to your business. It's going to take away, and then at a particular time it's like the chakra view, just to sustain the action you're keeping on doing, and that's not really required. So just be done with it, do a compounding, come out of it, ensure you put processes in place to ensure that you're in compliance, move ahead. And in fact, more and more Indian businesses are getting are getting capital from overseas. And if you are compliant, it certainly is going to be far more advantageous because the due diligence process then becomes very simple.
Right.
And if you have a good business model, why not? That's the way to go.
Yeah, I'll completely agree with you, ma'am, because I have done my startup myself, and I have had this experience of going through attracting investments from foreign institutions, and I could then realize the importance of compliance. How important compliance is, and how important it is to keep your house clean. to attract kind of investors and institutions on board. I mean, compliance do play a very very important role. So talking about this entire change which has happened in the business landscape in India in the last 10 years, in the last 15 years, we have seen startup has been the go-to word. India is one of the fastest and the fastest growing startup development hub in the world now. And I think almost I think the large part of the youth are bucked, or they basically are uh, fascinated by the word startup, right? And the dreams of being an entrepreneur is something which comes very easy to the youth of today. But when we compare the youth of today with the youth or the youth of say 20 years back, there has been a big difference in the attitude. I mean, today the youth is, or the millennials, we say, they have more resistance to rules and regulations. They want to just go out, do what they want to do, experiment, innovate, and just go ahead. And one of the things is they also have little knowledge about the compliance part. When they basically intend to start a business. Earlier, when people used to start a business, they were more mature and they had more support in terms of advisory to go and seek advisory and compliances. But today, within the startup ecosystem, when youth from tech background and from other background who are jumping into the business, when they start a business, they face a lot of challenge in terms of ignorance, in terms of understanding the importance of compliance. They are the one who are now driving the business. So in terms of understanding, how what is your message to these kind of entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs of today who are building startups, to basically look at compliance and follow compliance for their business?
You're absolutely right. Actually, the millennials believe in immediate gratification. They're not waiting for tomorrow. So therefore, compliance is something which is brought in as something which is external. But at the same time, once they start taking their businesses a little more seriously, they understand that there has to be a discipline. Actually, if you look at compliance, what exactly is compliance all about? It's just a question of putting a bit of discipline in place, which does happen even with the millennials, because when they realize that it is a business which they need to grow, it's not just a hobby for a couple of days. Yes, they will have to bring it in, but yes, it's one where they'll need to sit down and get it done. It is not one where you just look at the business. I mean, it's not like driving, because somebody has to put the highways, and if the road has too many pebbles, your speed is certainly going to get affected. So how do you ensure that these pebbles are thrown away, or that you don't have so many pebbles? You may have a couple of them. These pebbles are not boulders and they cannot stop you in your path. But at the same time, in order to do that, you need to be conscious as to which road you're going to be taking. Are you going to take the road which is understood as one which is compliant, or the one where you just take one and you chart your way as you go along? And if it's a second one, we're just going to be charting your way as you go along, you're certainly going to have a couple of pebbles hitting your tires, which will also affect the longevity of the tires, and you're going to be putting in more efforts to be able to do what you want to do. So therefore, yes, it is necessary for them to understand. It's not for the beauty of the thinking of the millennials is that most of them are mavericks. So therefore, they are going to be able to create something much faster, much better, and in a very short time, which is fantastic. But they also need to remember that it is necessary to look at a bit of discipline, do it your way, but understand that there is a bit of regulation which you need to take care of. I think that's a piece of advice which I would like to give. I won't say that it is wisdom, because I would say people of my generation would probably be a little more cautious. Maybe that's not required, because if you were actually very cautious, you may probably not be willing to go into new areas of business. But at the same time, it is necessary to be clear and have a conscious way of ensuring compliances.
Certainly, ma'am. I completely agree with you. But in the same breath, ma'am, I mean, if what is your message to the service providers, the experts who typically understand the domain of compliance? to reach out to these entrepreneurs who typically are more focused on business, right? Who are more business driven. What is your message to this people, to this servicing community, who are the domain experts, right? How do they reach out to these people, to the entrepreneurs? How do they, create trust and build a bridge between them so that the business owners start trusting these people more. They start taking the advice more seriously, and believe the importance of when they are advising that take the compliance seriously. What is the role, or what is it that the service provider community needs to do, in terms of approaching to the business owners?
So I'm going to take a word that you used, which I strongly believe in, which is trust. As a professional, it is very essential to build trust first, because people listen to you only when they trust you. When they listen, they hear what you're saying. And if they hear, they may do what you have said. At least a portion of it they'll end up doing. Now, for this to happen, they also need to see that what you're going to do is going to add value. While it is very easy to say that it is going to add value, they need to see the difference. Now, typically what happens is that when it comes to services, deliverables are not agreed beforehand. So agree on deliverables. And what I would suggest is don't go for a very big deliverable, which is difficult to measure in a short time span. As I was mentioning, millennials don't want to wait for a long period. Look at maybe a 15-day time span where you're going to be able to give a small chunk. Your initial dipstick will give you certain nuggets which you can just place before them. And how does one maneuver based on that is possibly phase two of what your work is going to be. If you're going to be dividing your work into phase one and phase two, the initial dipstick and thereafter being able to partner in the implementation or clearly show a path for implementation, I think it's a client for life then for the service provider. And for the service provider, it is necessary not to take on 10 streams. For a pilot, take one or maybe two if they need to be bundled together. Be able to show as to how exactly it's adding value or how exactly it's moving up. It could even be in terms of, let's say, putting processes in place to ensure compliances. In which case, look at the calendar-based compliances, event-based compliances, come up with a two-pager which gives the broad heads, and then say that if each of these needs to be tracked, this is the way it will be done. And maybe have a small clinic model where a person, see, clinic model survives only if the person who comes to the clinic knows as to what the problem is. If a person were to go to a doctor and say, "Mujhe nahi pata kya ho raha hai," the doctor is never going to be able to give you good advice. But if the patient is clear on the specific symptoms, he's certainly going to get assistance from the doctor. Now, you may have a set of people who are clear about their symptoms. You may have a set of people who just want to know what you can do to their business. And both these models, and actually I would say the second one, where the business comes to you and says, "Tell me what you can do," is completely a green field, and it's one where you're going to be able to do a beautiful job if you were to get such a client. So build trust in such a client, be able to show a two-page approach note, and take it forward thereafter.
I completely agree with you, ma'am, on this. Trust goes a long way in terms of building relationships and building business opportunities. So one of the very interesting questions which keep coming to us, as service providers, when we approach to the client, to the businesses, and I really want to understand it from you. I mean, typically, do you think that there is a cost, kind of matrix, or to determine what should be the compliance cost for a enterprise, or say the annual compliance cost for an entrepreneur? For example, we have certain thumb rules, in terms of your say personnel cost, or in terms of your technology cost, or in terms of your marketing cost. So similarly, I mean, does this industry has some kind of a cost matrix, which can be applied to the compliance cost for a company, say in a year, a percentage of revenue or something like that? I mean, does industry
So,
really have it?
yeah. Probably it may not be a percentage of the revenue, because when your business is very small, let's say your business is just about 10 lakhs, your costs probably may have been in the region of 3 to 4 lakhs also. But as you grow, you're not going to be actually spending 20% or 10%. But on a thumb rule, I would say, depending on the size of business, maybe it will be in the region of around 10 to 12%. However, it depends on the complexity of the business. It also depends on the phase of the business. Like, say, for example, in the initial phase where you're acquiring customers and you have more and more of agreements being drawn up, if the agreements are getting customized, they are different for each of them, and if there are indemnity clauses, the lawyer's involvement is going to be far greater, and your cost may possibly go up accordingly. But if you are having a boilerplate agreement, just maybe getting one agreement and then getting it signed by everyone else would probably bring it down. Now again, it depends on whether it's a product company or a project company. If, let's say, it's a software one, and it also is dependent on whether it is a B2B or a B2C. You would find that the cost of compliance in a B2C is much higher than a B2B, because when it comes to an interface with the customers directly, your touch points are far higher. So it's a mix of all this. And while one can't have a one size fits all, what I would suggest is, when you get such a client, ask the client to be a little patient, for you to work on a document which shows the areas where he needs support. Come up with something like a buffet and tell him, you tell me what you don't want in phase one, and then we'll accordingly implement it. Once he sees value, he's going to ask you to take it all along. And for example, internal controls, risk management are all to be thrown in. Now, will it happen at the first phase? If you go to a client and talk in terms of risk management where he has not even looked at internal controls, you'll definitely not get this assignment. But once the business is slightly mature and you talk about it, he will certainly welcome it, and he would want to know as to exactly how you're going to build it. It's not just about talking to 10 of his employees, but about understanding his business and having a deeper engagement. It could also be in the form of putting processes in place with respect to the new age laws. Like, for example, we have POSH, Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace. Now, one might think that it's only applicable to large businesses. Even if you have, let's say, the housekeepers coming into the place, and it might happen at 7 o'clock in the morning, where you have given the keys to someone, one of the office boys, and God forbid, if there is an incident, as an employer, one becomes responsible. So how exactly do you ensure compliance is where you suddenly get a call saying that you've got pulled into something which is pretty nasty? So therefore, creating awareness, ensuring that processes are put in place, ensuring that there is a risk directory, risk mitigation, and the net risk is properly handled, are all issues which one can address in a proper and in a systematic manner.
Correct. 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 I think it was great, ma'am. I think we have covered uh, uh, wider aspects of the business laws and regulations, which a business owner needs to comply, in terms of the importance of compliance, looking at compliance as an asset, over a longer period of time. Why, what should be the attitude towards complying with the rules and regulations as far as the businesses are concerned, and a lot of other stuff. I think it has been a very insightful, perspective, which you have brought on the table. We have around 10 minutes or 15 minutes of time left before we conclude this session. And I want to open this floor to the audience for questions, if any, right? So we have time for taking 2-3 questions. So if anybody in the audience has any question for ma'am, we'll be happy to take. Just unmute yourself. Shreya, can you unmute everybody, please?
Yeah, hi. This is Shekhar.
Hi, Shekhar.
Word.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to ask something. We often confuse between corporate governance and compliance. So,
Sure.
for an MSME, okay, they do understand compliance, but what is corporate governance? What kind of corporate governance does an MSME needs to bring in?
Sure. That's a very good question, Shekhar. Let me put it this way. Compliance is the first step to governance. Governance is of a much larger import, and governance includes within its fold compliance as well as the internal processes, as well as the processes that you have for ensuring compliances. All this put together, because compliances, one can say, you may have the perfect compliance system where you do a tick box compliance, but how do you ensure that it is replicated time and again? How do you ensure that there is a proper process put in place for transactional compliances, contractual compliances, and what is the way in which you do? For example, let me put it very colloquially. Let's assume in a small business of 20 people, the lowest grade employee were to be told that, do you know that such a thing has happened in your office? Will that person be able to say, ho hi nahi sakta? Now, just as character of a human being is called character, where you would be able to say that, look, this person can never do something like this, can we also be able to build that reputation of an organization to say that such a thing can never happen here? And that's exactly what corporate governance practices do to a business. So how do you build this? What you need to understand is, let's take it down to the basic brass tacks. I would say compliance is, of course, the basic one, because the manifestation of governance happens through compliances, which is what the external world sees. At the same time, as I was mentioning, transactional compliances. Let me give a simple small example of related party transactions. What is the approach if there are related party transactions? Even if it's a small business, if you have a very clear way of doing things. And let me tell you, over the years, I've worked in promoter-led companies. I've also worked in multinationals. I've also worked in service industry as well as in manufacturing. And I've actually seen that it's not, corporate governance is not really very different. I mean, in some of the promoter-led companies, it's of a much higher order. I've also worked in small companies. It's not that it was always a very large company. So it's a way of doing business. So what are the components of doing business? As I said, how do you have board practices put in place? It's not just one person deciding, saying ki, "Theek hai, maine bola to ye ho gaya." That's not the way business should be run. If it's a sole proprietary concern, yes, of course. But if it's a corporate entity, ensure that the board of directors do meet. They get a chance to talk. How do you handle conflicts? If there are conflicts, do people speak up? Or is it one where, there is a group think and therefore everything is left the way it is broadly decided with no one really owning up? How do you create that process ownership? How do you ensure that contractual compliances are ensured? How do you ensure that there is an ownership and founder mentality mindset among all the employees, where everyone is moving towards a single goal? And that's exactly what corporate governance achieves. Now, while I said all this at a conceptual level, let me tell you the components would basically be internal control, risk management, and processes for managing all this, including board processes, will comprise of course, which, as I said, an integral manifestation is in the form of compliances, and all this put together will come under the broad head of corporate governance.
Thank you, ma'am. I mean, I think it was pretty comprehensive and pretty clear and simple. Any more questions from the audience? So if we don't have any more questions, then I would like to just conclude this session. I think I need to thank you, ma'am, for speaking to us. I think this session was really enjoyable. I mean, we got a perspective on compliance, which was very insightful. We thank you so much for speaking to us and for making time from a busy schedule and coming and sharing your views with us. So thank you once again for your time. And if we basically come across more questions from the participant, we'll certainly address to you and seek answers from you. So thank you once again,
Sure.
everyone, for joining this session. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be more than happy to address questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.